about your practice, and then talk about your selection, why you decided to select these 5 amazing films and artists, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mania. And also I just wanted to say thank you very much for inviting me to do this. It was a real privilege actually to have the time to think about what works I'd like to put together and to reach out to these artists and reconnect and put this program together. And I realized actually through the whole time I'd done my PhD research, I'd written about artists, but I'd actually never curated a program of their works. So this was an opportunity to do that. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm really happy with what came together. About my own practice, I feel like I've taken this kind of very circuitous trajectory through dance to video art to painting. They're all quite intermingled and interwoven. Then my work has become very abstract now at the moment, and for a long time it was very much dealing about representation, dealing with the politics of the body. And that was really the basis of my PhD research, which was looking at works that had inspired me as a young woman that I'd come across in my 20s, works from the 70s and 80s that had really opened my eyes to feminist politics, to activism, to a lot of the ideas that I still think are very important around objectification, the gaze, representation and agency. You know, all these things I really had not thought of before, particularly as a young woman growing up through the 90s, where feminist theory, you know, feminism was positioned as abject and as embittered. It was not cool to be a feminist. And so my access point was video practice. And what I was really thinking about in my PhD research was how did this connect to a new wave of activism, a new generation of women coming forward who are in some ways dishearteningly still addressing many of the same issues. And yet also there has been progress, there has been things that are shifting on, and that these are still ways in which women are challenging dominant representations and challenging what their own subjectivity is in the culture that surrounds us. And there's a means to actually reach out to other women, to other people in society. And I found video art an incredibly important format for doing this. So, you know, when you came to me and said, you know, your criteria was, you had 3 criteria. One, it had to be a program of, so it had to be a program of feminist video art, needed to be by contemporary artists and 5 artists. And it was, you said just how important feminism is to you, and you know that registers with me. And it was a really lovely thing to do, just to sit down and think about all the works that I'd looked at over the course of my PhD, all the things I'd sat through. And, you know, there was a lot of works that were there, but what ones had particularly stayed with me over the years. I think in all of these instances, I just remember that first point of watching them, and I've seen them a few times since. And then thinking about how did these works connect to each other. And what was really apparent to me was that all of these works are very much about transgressing boundaries, you know, pushing past, like I said, that, you know, dominant representation, it kind of bounds us. And that was the common thread between these works. I was trying to think of my notes quickly of the first paragraph I'd written in my program note, which was really nice to put together. But in these works, it was that there is a refusal to be contained. And I think that's actually really important, and really important to feminist politics today, the way in which we refuse to be contained, we refuse to be bounded, and how we can use video in this instance to push out from that. So that was my thinking in putting together this program. And yeah, I was really happy that all the artists that I contacted were really happy to be part of it. And I'm really glad that 3 of us can be here today. You know, Ingrid Berthon-Moine and Phoebe Collings-James can't meet with us, but really happy to be here with Maria, Martina and Miriam, and with you, Mania, who is the platform curator.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed, honestly, when I watched all films together, specifically when you start to watch all of them together. And that's, you can find really amazing connection between all of them. And Maria, I really like your films. That I want to start from you and just you. I start to some research about you and your work. That thank you, Catherine. I didn't know that we have amazing Iranian British artists in UK too. That you introduced me honestly, and I started to some research and I found that your practice is is connection between body and exactly politic and society too, with different approach. And you're working on installation and dance, and not exactly dance, performance honestly, performance, and also just moving images. And could you a little bit talk about this kind of connection and practice? What is your practice? And then we can talk about your film too. And I want the first you talk about a little bit your structure of your practice, what you are doing, and what is this combination together. And yeah, just let us know just more about your work.
Okay. I mean, I always find it really difficult to speak about my work in general, but I'll have a go at it. Basically, I trained as a sculptor in fine art in late 80s. So, you know, um, and it was very unusual for a woman Iranian artist to be making sculptures. Particularly at that time, I think I only knew Shiraze Hushiari, who made some sculptures, but then her name was, I mean, you mentioned name and my name, that is kind of quite ambivalent, which is something I really love about the fact that I've been called Maria, because I do have two names. My mother called me Maria. My grandmother wanted my name to be Molud. And finally, I decided, you know what? I'm just going to be the Maria that everybody calls me. So, but the naming issue is a big deal for me, which I don't think we've got time to speak about. However, you've asked me about my practice. So I started as a sculptor, considering time based, because a sculpture you'll have to move around an object. And kind of, so you're moving in time already. So that already connects me to video work, that already connects me to installation. But not only my practice is through installation, film, photography, I paint. My God, I do it all. But then I also have curated a lot. I've, and in recent years, I've also done a PhD, which kind of makes me a researcher. Also made videos. I mean, I wouldn't call them films as such, but for me, it's about kind of, it is about performing in front of the camera. So it's about witnessing myself within my social and political context. Is also almost like a documentary of my own time. It's really important that, especially with diaspora artists, artists who are here and artists who haven't, kind of, you just said you haven't actually known about me, which is, I've been in this business for over 25 years. What it shows is a lack of visibility in this particular context that I find myself. There hasn't been a fantastic Iran Britain relationship. So there is a phobia on both sides. One that is Iranophobia, and there's a history to it. And of course, what would it mean if they show an Iranian, an Iranian artist is shown? What does it actually say? There's a whole lot of political and social and kind of imperial history all gets mixed up together. So my way of dealing with it is really working across all mediums. You see, my intervention is, I will work through, I want to be creative, and I will work through curating to make my voice heard. I will write about things. I will I will make sculptures, installation. So I would say I don't have a fixed position, but I have a very curious mind. I'm very curious about everything, and I'm curious about artists. I'm curious about my own position within this context, and in relation to time, colonialism, and Orientalism.
Beautiful, Miriam, just beautiful. Just uh, I think I think that it's very beautiful. I have a question. Is it your curating is part of your practice, or you look at the curating a different subject? And uh,
Well, curating for me is an extension of my practice.
oh, fantastic! That's
So is almost my relationship with the artists that I create platform for, is approached in a very artistic way. I'm very involved with the artists. I totally love the artists I actually work with. So yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is that there are areas of intersection between myself and the artists I actually work with, or the artists that I create platforms for. I mean, I worked for 198 Gallery, Contemporary Arts and Learning, which is really a Black um, kind of gallery, really, for Black artists, underrepresented artists. And for me, that's a huge interest. I mean, that's really important to me.
amazing. And let's a little bit talk about your film at See, Hear, Speak 2003 is a 4 minutes performance. And uh, I really like it that you perform in front of the camera. And also it's very interesting for me that it was a black, everything was black. For me, it was like a shadow, but wasn't.
Yes.
And the background was completely red, and also we could see some moving and with your hair, but normally in Iran you have to cover your hair, but here your hair cover your face is completely was opposite. That the movement was so, and the music and movement and dancing 4 minutes was so beautiful for me. And just could you tell a little bit about the context of the project and what happened to you and why you decided to make this short films 4 minutes about female body. I think it has a really relationship between female body and movement for me was and I would like to know more about it.
To be honest, when I was making the video, I wasn't thinking I'm going to make a video about this, that, and the other. I think I perform in response to my context, and I would say it's always multi-layered. So and I always love different people kind of peeling out off different kind of reading of it. But I think for me, I was really fed up of this idea of the whale. Women have to wail. It's just so cliche, and I really couldn't stand answering a cliche with another cliche. So for me, and at the same time, you want to. I mean, it was important for me to make a statement about patriarchy. Make a statement about patriarchy, but also make a statement about the attitudes that are formed, from a very long time ago. I mean, I talk about this in my PhD, actually, about these kind of assumptions that is always about wailing, repression, and every show that has come up since 2000. And I talk about this a lot, that if you look at all the media coverage, it's always about the whale. So for me, it was really about turning that around, number one. So that bringing my own hair as the whale rather than using a whale. But also, I think it was also partly to do with the fact that there was a lot of kind of belly dancing thing. I mean, there are two things that I concentrate on. Belly dancing, which is very sexual, at least it's presented in that way. There's a whole history to belly dancing anyway, which is to do with giving birth. And it gradually over time became about, kind of performed in front of Westerners, and they took it from Egypt. There's a whole, like a really solid history to this dance that most people don't know. So I wanted the camera, rather than focusing on the sexual belly and the body, which is kind of focuses on the mid body usually, because a lot of movement happens there, is to do with childbirth. If the movement developed to do with childbirth. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to move the camera from there, from the kind of mid section, and move it towards to personalize it, to bring it into the person. So it kind of looks at my head and my self-agency within, for the camera to witness, rather than witnessing my sexuality, which I don't have a problem with, but I do have a problem with colonialists and Western feminism. In a way, for me, is problematic in the way that it judges me, in the way that it presumes particular points of view. So it was challenging. It's critical on all kind of sides for me. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That I want to know that Tina and Miriam, did you watch her video art, her films, or you didn't have time to watch it? Do you have any point, and if you want to conversation and talk about it, we would really appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, Maria, thank you for that. I actually watched it. I watched it yesterday, and I hadn't seen it before. And I mean, for me, as you talked about sort of being a sculptor of, to begin with, and I could really feel that or see that in the form that was sort of presented to the camera, sort of the head and the hair and the hands as a sculptural element, and then sort of how that transformed into something that was sort of almost more than the body, but also sort of the maid and the sculptor's figure. So I found that really, I could relate to that without sort of also with the obviously also with the story of the veil and how the hair and the hands stand in for the veiling and unveiling. So, but also just as this sculptural object, and I always find that in relation to feminism really interesting, that aspect of taking space, and that the figure, the woman as a body sort of is asked or is not allowed, it's sort of being seen to take up space, but then in this transformed form obviously takes up space. And also just the blackness of your hair that then covers in the film the full lower part of the, in contrast to the red covers the image, which is amazing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. It was interesting point. Thank you. That, and how about Miriam? Did you?
Yeah, yeah, I also watched your video yesterday, Maria, and was really happy to see it. And yeah, I think for me there was a kind of sense of this very complex relationship with the performance that moved through what felt at first like there was a kind of quite hunched, very kind of tentative series of movements where we were also very uncertain about what we were seeing and what this body was, whether it was human, and what orientation we had in relation to it. And I felt that there was something about maybe touching on shame in the initial movements, this kind of hunching and covering, and the kind of body position, that then kind of turned towards something that felt much more kind of uncontrolled and had a kind of defiance and almost slightly violent edge to it in this dance. And I was really struck by that progression and the kind of complexity that it holds in relation to notions about performance, taking up space, being present in a body as a woman.
Yeah, thank you for both your kind of reading into it. First of all, I have to really say thank you to Catherine for actually, after all these years, remembering the work. So yeah, thank you, Catherine, for that. But also in kind of in response to what you were saying, which is very interesting in the way you read the work. Of course, there is that aspect of it, but rather than violence is frustration, is about seeing, about hearing, about speaking your position. And also, you know, like you were saying, like Martina was saying, that there is a sculptural element there. You know, it's like this head and this body, and it's quite solid within a space. Also, you know, there are references. Okay, so what I was wearing, and I think what is interesting that throws is the rupush that we wear. Rupush is a form of kind of long, what would you say, Monia? It's like a something that covers your body. We don't have to wear a chador, which covers the hair, the head and the body. It just covers the body, and then you have a scarf with it. In Iran, usually it's about a covering. So it's as I said, I think all my work, I would say, is always multi-layered. I'm also referencing the colors that were used in, you know, kind of, there is this, the reason you see violence is that fascistic kind of coloring that I use is you know, kind of responding to a fascistic claustrophobic environment, because red can be quite claustrophobic as a color. You know, it's kind of, it kind of takes the whole body, this kind of object or subject, but yet the black of my gear and my hair actually, for me, gives it the presence that it needs to have. Is about that body, that agency that's kind of fights against this environment quite manically. Yeah.
Thank you, Miriam. Sorry, can you hear me? But it's also for me, it was very important that normally the power wants to control our body. For me, it was poetic too, honestly. Very poetic images. And Catherine, you select this film. Could you a little bit talk about this film and why you selected it specifically? This film that exactly is connected to performing dance and also for me painting too. And could you talk about it too?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I saw this film back in 2012, around about then. You know, quite early in my PhD journey. Maria was doing her PhD at Chelsea too, and was presenting. I can't remember what the event was, but you were showing some of your work, and I think some other artists did, and I can't remember any of the other details, but I remember this video very, very strongly. It was something that really connected with me, but I hadn't seen it since then, so 10 years. So I got in contact with you and asked if I could see it again, and as soon as I watched it, it was just like, yes, you know, this is why it stayed with me. It's such a powerful film. I think, you know, there were these critical moments throughout it actually that are just very important. You know, right from the very beginning, that moment actually when you're confused about which way the performer is standing. There's that moment where you think that they're actually standing with their back to you, with their hair flowing down their back. And of course, instead there's that motion, and as you lift up and you see the hands, that just says to you right at the beginning, what you have perceived you are mistaken about, so right from the beginning, you're like, okay, I have to be aware of my own assumptions of what I think I'm seeing, and I have to be aware of being challenged here. I think it challenged a lot of my own, viewpoints as well. As a Western feminist, I read about the veil. This is something that is in our consciousness. The submission of Middle Eastern women. This is something that's, is just there, prevalent in Western culture. And it was just very interesting for me how it immediately kind of threw back a lot of these, not even conscious kind of assumptions, they're just things that you've absorbed on the periphery. And it threw lots of these assumptions back at me, and was again just like, you have to really think quite strongly here actually about identity and about subjectivity and agency and how it relates to different women, and have to challenge my own kind of privileged white thinking. And so I found that it was not only just a work that I connected to on quite a physical, visceral level. And I think when I'm looking at works that really connect with me, it is something about the visceral level that they connect with me on, that physicality. So not only did it connect with me through your motion, and actually I don't kind of read it as a violent motion either. I read it as it becomes very, to me, exuberant. Actually, there's a real sense of liberation in it at points where, that moment where you're dancing and it's just like, you could throw yourself over the edge kind of thing, but you throw yourself back, you're very kind of strong in those moments, but you're not going to fall. Like, there's no sense of that, but this sense of real strength in it. So yeah, I just found it a very important work through those different levels. So yeah, physically, viscerally, intellectually as well, and that's really what stayed with me. One question I did want to ask actually, Maria, was just about the music, how you selected that and chose that, because it seems to me to be so important, so integral, and I wondered whether that's something that you had made for the piece, or whether you actually had selected something and what you'd based that on.
It's Reda Darvish, and I kind of I had to get in touch with them and ask if I could use their music, which they were kind enough to say yes. Sound is key, because sound really does place it. I didn't want the signifier of the whale, but I also, when I kind of take the camera from below right up to the to my face, it begins to kind of shift the belly, because it's belly dancing music basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, apart from the fact that I love dance. When I hear music, it goes right in, and I don't see anything else. I am in the music, and I love it, and I don't necessarily perform it all the time. I mean, I use it as a way to speak my social and political moment, or kind of. But in terms of sound is really important to me. So yes, it was chosen out of a whole range of belly dancing music, because I was referencing belly dance. I was contesting the way it is looked at. It's kind of sexualized, it's changed throughout. I mean, there's so much to say about Orientalism and colonialism. I wrote a whole PhD about it. At the same time, I'm also contesting both worlds, everything. I mean, it's like anything that kind of tries to suppress me, I'm just pushing against it, basically. And sound was a really great way of actually placing it, but then refusing to accept it. I wasn't going to be sexual with the belly dancing music. I was going to say something about myself and my and my positionality, basically.
And also one important point that I really like, normally just when the curator or programmer they want to select the films from Middle East, they present women with hijab, and it's very exotic, and for them, and it's very Orientalism and exotic for them, and they want that they think women from Middle East is exactly with chador.
Yeah.
And that is very, that it was very, that's why when I watched the first time the film, I didn't know that. I couldn't understand that you are Iranian.
Yeah.
When I watched the film, I couldn't understand. When I started to read your biography, and I understood, and I thought that's great, because honestly, I'm exhausted, and it's ridiculous that nonstop presents women from Middle East to the world in cinema.
Yes.
And the story is so cliche. With
It
the
is.
chador, art chador. The title is in the contemporary art is art chador.
But yeah, chador art, and I write about this, and I gave a presentation with INIVA and Decolonizing Institute, where I talk about this, and I critique the media. I've done a whole chapter on this, so if you ever are interested in reading about it, please. And I'm so happy that you've actually mentioned it.
Send me. Yeah,
I will definitely send you the chapter. I mean, it's going to become a book, I hope, one hopes. That's the kind of thing, Miriam, you can look forward to, is having the writing all ready for a book. But yeah, I mean, I really talk about this, and I go into media projection. I go into Iranian curators. Some curators are incredibly lazy, so they pick up on the most obvious thing, which just really makes me angry. Part of it was my frustration at these, and part of my curatorial work is actually to do with what I'm not seeing.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Maria. We really enjoyed from your conversation and everything about your work. And I would like to ask about Tina. Tina, I really like your films, and honestly, I know that because I'm more closer to you more than other artists, because we meet each other a lot. But I know your practice and work is a relationship between performance, sculpture, and also something just architecture and design and object too. But your film for me, it was honestly, I watched many times, and it was really really amazing that the main original film is exactly was opposite, that you changed the gender, you just exactly you are naked, you perform in the space is really important, and also you took the objects to that this connection and relationship. It was very interesting. But I want to first question why you decided, what happened relationship between you and this film, and or how just you effect on you decided to remade this film again.
Yeah, thank you, Manya, for the and the enthusiasm, and thanks, Catherine, for so much for including me in that selection. I was really kind of very happy, and I was also very lucky to be able to restage that performance at Beaconsfield, Catherine, when you selected me for that exhibition, and to refilm it, because I had done it before in 2012, and I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to do it again, because it is quite a hard sort of choreography to kind of take hold in your body and in your head. And I mean, I love Robert Morris, but I'm also absolutely furious with him. So so how dare you, old sculptural man, take up so much space and leave none to whoever. But at the same time, I also absolutely adore that man, and I was really sad when I heard he was dead. So the performance itself is, it was in a way, it was a sort of, in a way, it was a weird combination of longing and forensic questioning of in a way, of the daddies and the teachers we all kind of have. Because in my education in the 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't much in terms of female role models given, and also because I come from a very always worked in very male-dominated jobs and very physical jobs. I'm very used to male role models and identifiers where I say, oh, this is cool, this is really great. So, and Robert Morris was certainly one of them. So, and I really valued the working together with my co-performer Robert Luzar, and working through the script of the performance that we got from the Robert Morris Archive in New York, and just in a way rediscovering or questioning that script through reenacting it, and sort of almost forensically going through it and finding out the parts where it could work or it couldn't work, or where we both thought, this is impossible. Robert Morris, you are cheating. You've done something with this performance that isn't right. Either that piece of wood wasn't that heavy as everybody thinks it was, or something else was going on, or you had some help. So it was almost as having, in a way, of feeling that body feeling Robert Morris' body with my own, or through my own, in conversation with Robert Luzar. And that conversation with Robert Luzar was actually really important for me, in that way of finding a conversation between the differences in when we're talking about physical labor. So really kind of experiencing these physical differences of our bodies through working with the weight and the material of the wooden sheet. And for me, in sort of retrospect, this kind of working together and this laborious aspect of the performance is actually the most important one, or has become the most important one, as in that sense of what are both bodies, male and female, being subjected to in physical labor, and how do we handle it, and how do we deal with it, and how do we then deal with each other while handling the situation. And so these moments of exchange, of taking over and giving over of the gloves and the object that was to be moved, that were sort of the most important parts in that performance. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Tina. And just the video is the main video is, I think, is long. Is it 32 minutes, maybe more? Yeah.
No, it's 18 minutes long. 18
minutes long.
Yeah.
And just the camera was there, and you didn't have any cuts. Just you continue. Yes.
No.
That's amazing. It was one frame, one shot. Yeah, one without any cut.
It was one shot, and we decided to include the moments where I had to go back and read through the script again. So we decided to include those moments of hesitation and those moments of thinking about it in the shot. So because they, in a way, that the sort of reconnecting through the paper to Robert Morris' writing, to kind of reassure myself in that sense of, really, that's what you're doing? Are you sure? That was important for me, to see that fight almost with the script as a sort of conversation with someone who wasn't there but was physically very present.
Did you watch the Tina's film, or Did you have time to watch?
I saw your film, Tina, and I loved it. I mean, I know Robert Luzar because he was at Chelsea. I think Catherine might remember that. And I've he's great as well. And but I loved the whole the way you're holding. I mean, as a sculptor, I really connected with it. I love the your presence. That this woman who's like takes this thing and it moves it around, and it almost became an abstract um and figure. It was almost like a painting but in a space. And I really connected with it, the physicality of it, the woman being proactive, and then you have Robert kind of lying down, is almost like this oriental kind of pose, which is very much about lying down, and then the woman is the active agent there. And but not only that, you're just moving this like rectangular object in space is absolutely amazing. As a matter of fact, you know, in our sculpture department, we obviously, I mean, it was very strange for most women to do sculpture in late 80s, but you know, there were quite a few of us in one year. And I remember all the technicians usually would be men. And the way you were using the gloves and the shoes were quite distinct. And then nudity isn't, and then covering just those two parts becomes significant in terms of walking quite solidly and then holding quite solidly and then shifting things. It was absolutely amazing. I loved it. I have to say, I absolutely loved the work, and I'm so glad I actually managed to see it.
Thank you, Maria.
So thank you very much for that. Yeah,
that's great. I mean, there is a nod to Orientalism in a way, because it is or is it? Yes, I think it is, because it's the painting, that pose is based on his Olympia by Monet.
That's right. Yeah.
So there is already, and I mean, there is Robert Morris, in terms of sort of talking about painting, it's definitely the performance itself by Robert Morris is definitely a take on painting in that sense. And the sort of the covering of the parts of the body and the shoes and the gloves were definitely and then leaving the rest of the body naked was in that sense very important for me. Because I wanted to show the difference between the two bodies, or the difference in a very, not in a sort of kind of having a pointing it out, or having a sort of like lift up my finger and go like, there's a difference. So, but in a sense of, this is what that difference means, and the consequences are there, the different and how, and this is one of the origins of how women and men treat each other, in terms of how we deal with each other as well. So, and that kind of rootedness and physicality in terms of how to deal with each other, for me was very important, and as well as it was for Robert Luzar. So, and we talked quite a lot about this in terms of kind of how to use weight, and how to use arms, how to use legs, how to use the body in relation to the weight.
Yes, it looks incredibly well choreographed, but as you say, it changed as it went along. So
definitely changed.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see that. Yeah.
And I saw the performance itself, so it was also interesting to kind of watch the video sometime after seeing the performance, which was also incredibly striking. And I think the thing that really struck me whilst watching the performance was the sense of your kind of strength and fluidity moving with this very heavy and awkward object. And I don't know that that came through quite in the same way with the video, but there was this real kind of encounter between your body and this huge board that I really felt. And the choreography and your kind of confidence and kind of sensitivity in manipulating this board was really remarkable.
Thanks, Miriam. Yeah, I think the performance was way after we filmed the video itself. So, and I really like the film as a thing of sort of including the struggle, or including the discovery of the and including this conversation, this ongoing conversation with the thing itself, that wasn't quite finished yet. And then in the performance, there was obviously the kind of stress and of the performance itself in front of an audience is a different situation. And then this obviously then maybe that then comes across as something else, and also sound, because the performance, the live performance had a soundtrack, which was quite important in that sense, because it was the soundtrack of a construction site, and that was not in the video. So the video, in a way, itself is purely the conversation with the artwork and amongst ourselves. So there is these two are distinct in a way, but I kind of didn't really want to have the film of the live performance as the video. I wanted to have this filmed search, a process, rather as standing as the work.
Catherine, I remember that I watched this film in the group exhibition, I think 3 years ago, maybe
4 years ago now. 4 years, well, before
4
years
ago.
this summer. Yeah.
And then I think you curated that exhibition too, yes or not? I'm wrong.
I co-curated it with Rose Gibbs and directors of Beaconsfield Gallery, Vauxhall, which was where the show was.
Could you explain what happened to you that 2 times, to different contexts, you created this film, and what was the relationship for you with this film? And more conversation, talk about your idea about the film and why you selected.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't quite sure what the question was, but why I selected this film and the relationship between me seeing it back in Beaconsfield 4 years ago and now. I mean, it was really interesting to me, Martina, doing this reenactment. Reenactment, something I've been quite interested in myself, and done some reenacted videos. So I was really interested in how Martina was going to approach this, and also the fact that it was a work that I was very familiar with. You know, I came through dance, had a lot of interest in Judson Dance Theatre in the 1960s. This really interesting moment where a lot of painters, sculptors, dancers, early kind of video artists or experimental cinema artists got together and were making work collectively. So in this instance, it's, you know, Robert Morris and Carolee Schneemann. And I remember reading about Carolee Schneemann saying that actually in the performance that she had felt so objectified, and she really, you know, resented that. She really kind of had some very complicated feelings about that, being put into that position, having obviously, you know, put herself in that position as well, and just having to sit through that performance where she was silent and mobile and very conscious of her objectification throughout. So it's a work that I've never necessarily been all that keen on, because I look at it and I see that. And so when Martina said, actually, I want to reenact this and, you know, reconfigure this, I was really excited, and she thought, great, this is going to be really interesting. So it was part of this exhibition that we were doing at Beaconsfield. Miriam was part of the exhibition too. Beaconsfield commissioned this particular work, and Martina was able to film in the railway arch that they had at the back. And I have to confess, actually, that at the beginning, when Martina was talking me through some of the ideas about how she was going to reconfigure it, I had some objections, actually, and was like, oh, I don't think you should do it. I was probably a bit of difficult. I hate to say that. And I remember Martina saying, I have to do it how I need to do it, and get out of my soup, I think was the word. Which was really important, and actually a very big learning curve for me as a curator, because I had this real kind of anxiety about what Martina was actually going to bring in. And my objection was about Robert Morris being clothed and having, Robert Lazar being clothed and having his turn with the plywood, and actually how that could undermine what Martina was trying to do around objectification and then the gaze. And then I watched the film and I was just like, shut up, Kheirhan, this is incredible. This is an incredibly powerful performance, and it is Martina's performance that makes this work. Like, there is skill in there. There is a real kind of verve and confidence. And there's like a pragmatic approach to it as well that I find very important. Even that pragmatism in the nudity, and yet you have those thick workman gloves on. That's really important. And the way that you, I actually think for me, the way that you, in the video, the way that you consult the notes, the way that you have that relationship, it's very pragmatic. And I think that's a really important relationship, actually, when you're viewing it. I think through that, Martina just completely turns the reading of the first performance on its head, and we see this this real, it transfigures boundaries. It's unusually it's a naked body in front of us that we do not objectify. I feel like she pushes back against the gaze, and she really situates her agency on the screen very importantly. And actually, it's very important that Robert Lazar is there and clothed, because it's very fascinating to me how powerless actually he comes across, even in his clothing. And I think that there's a real important reconfiguration of relationships that happens there, and that his performance in comparison to Martina's there's a hesitancy to it. Like, he hasn't quite got the steps, hasn't quite got the way of maneuvering it in the way. And I think actually after, if I remember correctly, after Robert has his turn at performing with the plywood, it comes back to you for a while, Martina.
Yeah.
And you take it on again and continue this very beautifully choreographed performance with it, and then it ends. I'd love also to hear a little bit more. I mean, you touched on it already, but just I think that opening phase of the video, where both you and Robert, you're clothed, you're moving the wood round, you're stood there saying, I think something like, is it on? You've got the sound thing, and that it kind of sets it up in a very interesting way for me. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I actually have to thank you, Kheirhan, for being difficult in that context, because that kind of actually helped me a lot in thinking clearly about the work and what I was doing. And in a way, I was so, in my mind, it was so clear of that what the work was doing for me, and I was making the work for me more than anything, that I didn't really, that quite arrogantly, I didn't quite pay attention to how this would come across, and I couldn't imagine anybody not understanding what I understood. So, which is obviously a stupid position to be in, but there we are. And so in that sense, I knew about the sort of comments of Coralie Schneemann, and I knew about sort of her work, and sort of love her very much in that sense. And as somebody who was always kind of participating in performances of other people as well, I know that position very well, and how that is a difficult position to be in, between, on that line of feeling used and feeling empowered. And so to include the beginnings and the ends of the filming of the performance and of the setting up, for me, was very important, because I felt that during the time of the week I had, or I don't know, a couple of days of filming and choreographing and rehearsing, I also with Mirko Buffelli and Julia Benke, we became, and Robert Lazar, we became a sort of team of 4 in terms of making the work. So it was very important for me to include that work, but also to include the definite situation that I was in charge of what was happening sort of on and off screen. And to be really clear about sort of that this is my work, and this is, although it is a collaboration, it is also my work and my thinking that goes in it. But then to include, for me, in a way, working very much through the process in order to make things or to discover things. Almost more importantly than the finished work, to my detriment most of the time. So, and to have that process of discovery sort of standing as the work is important for me, as well as for the relationship, that for the ongoing discussion of that I have in terms of what feminism is for me and how I do it, because it's obviously, it hasn't stopped. So and we haven't stopped, and there's still a lot of work to do. So to include that sense of, okay, this isn't over yet. So this discussion is still ongoing. We still got work to do, but also to have this kind of, as you said, pragmatism in it, which comes for me mostly from working with men, or working in situations with a lot of men, and to work in a ways that where we need to protect each other physically, because our bodies are on the line. So, and to see that relationship of the male and the female body in relation to the physical work situation, and how we deal with each other in this. Oh, cat. Hello.
Hi, this is Martha. So come to join us.
So how we deal with the other's body, and how that becomes vital in the relationship we have, and how we deal with each other, which is a sort of such an important point in feminism, or in my sort of struggle with trying to use feminism to be feminist.
Can I just make a comment? I was just, in terms of what Catherine was saying, just for a quick comment, that I really love the fact that you didn't actually go with the idea of kind of getting Robert to take off his clothes, and then you chose to continue to be nude, in terms of kind of the horizontality of Robert's kind of position and you being upright. It almost already kind of says a lot, but it takes it out of that cliche of, you know, the Olympia, the whole, you know, the painting in itself. So you just turned that around, which I really loved about that.
Yeah, but the thing was that Robert actually wasn't lying down. He was only lying down at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then he got up and he was sitting upright. But in a way, it was sort of almost such a passive sitting, in terms of just like, well, you might just as well lie down.
And also, it was one point that was very important for me. For me, was like a metaphor of you wanted to reread a gay's mail. Do you know what I mean? Just exactly opposite, because we need to reread a gay's mail in the moving image and cinema a lot, because I think female body, most of the film in Iranian cinema, they're objectified, and also in Hollywood too, many films, many in industry and in moving image too. But for me, it was just exactly a woman wants control and read gaze mail and directed exactly opposite way. That I really enjoyed. That it was very interesting point for me too.
Thanks, Manya.
Oh, we can't hear you, Mania.
Miriam, I started some research about your work, and I found that your practice is a relationship between, I really like it, mythology and the politics of the body. Could you a little bit talk about your practice too, and then we talk about your work, your beautiful short film too?
Yeah, sure. So I made the film some time ago now, and at the time I was doing research into representations of wilderness landscapes as transgressive and transformative spaces, or spaces that somehow instigated transformative experiences. I've always been very interested in folklore and myth associated with specific landscapes. So I think that kind of ground of thinking and my own experience of being part of landscapes and a kind of orientation towards the organic and the kind of rhythms of the natural world are very important in my practice. Yeah, I think I suppose kind of human meaning making around living within the seasons, living with cycles of growth and decay, and how we understand our bodies as well through these kind of symbolic stories and practices that emerge. So perhaps that gives a bit of a background to developing this piece. Well, I was thinking about partly about the Christian mystics and their ways of living in landscapes, and I came across the Christian image of the pelican, the mother pelican, who supposedly fed its own chest, its own breast to its young, and that this was a kind of sort of image of the Christ-like sacrifice, and that was just something that was kind of happening for me. I wasn't kind of deliberately addressing this image, but that was one thread that kind of led into this. I suppose the kind of the body becoming something other than straightforwardly human, and yeah, I think Catherine, when you wrote about the piece, it made me realize that I think what I was playing with in some ways was a very kind of ambiguous relationship with the body and with an experience of kind of I suppose this highly kind of sexualized site, the breast, and the site that is also defined by the expectations of motherhood and provision, and kind of switching this or twisting that in some way. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That I really liked the film specifically because I have a breast cancer history, and then when I look at the film and I thought, wow, that's amazing. That's and I want to know that what happened. You decided to, for me, it was relationship between body, human body, and animals too, and it was just very. I remember some honestly mythology about Iran, about female body too, and that's what fascinating. I started to research and I found that wow, it's part of your practice. And what can you tell me a little bit about this kind of relationship between human body and animal's body for you, and what was that you decided to just exactly mix them and make a new body? It was very beautiful, and it was like a new body for female that is just moving the just. And also the breast break 2012, just I want to give some information about it. And just if you a little bit explain what happened, why you're fascinated about to put to just mix this human body and animal's body together. And somehow I thought that it was very interesting, and I thought that it was the like a crow. No, it wasn't crow. Yeah,
I think it wasn't referring to a specific bird. Yeah, it was a sort of compilation of different beaks.
That is exactly your belly, and it's coming out of part of your body. That was, I thought, is live. Is, do you know what I mean? That it was very interesting because it has moving, and definitely remind you animals, just birds, remind you birds. That it was interesting that this combination between bird and your body. And could you explain a little bit what is this relationship for you?
Yeah, I think maybe there's something about finding a language, and I often think about this piece as there being a sense of the body speaking, and I hope that in some way my own kind of presence as a kind of a witness to that is ambiguous within this work, because I think there's this. My experience was that there was something surprising about what happened, and it was. Lots of people think it's CGI, but it was a sculptural piece where I had a kind of thread that I was operating it with, and I hope that it somehow touches on the kind of yeah, as I said earlier, the very complicated relationship that we may have with our bodies, as particularly as women, kind of moving from a kind of sense of failure to fulfill the kinds of expectations that we might perceive, or that we might imagine others bring to our bodies, and thus bring ourselves, as well as the body's language, which is always transgressive and always has its own logic and its own power as well. So
And so for me, it was very surrealistic approach, and also I really like your gaze. Look at your audience, and it was same times for me. Your gaze, you were a viewer and also witness too at the same time. That you look at us, and you were just had a conversation with your eyes to us, and it was very beautiful because specifically of your eyes that just focus. It was like a viewer and witness fan same time. That's it was very interesting. Did you watch the Miriam's films? Just to...
Yeah, I did, and I was just going to say that sort of Miriam, I think you said that you wanted yourself to be sort of ambivalent, and I had a real kind of sense of sort of saying like, no, you're not ambivalent, you're very present. So because like Manya, I've really enjoyed this gaze of yours to the camera, which almost was so serious, and so this okay, what have you got to say for yourself, in that sense of slightly almost taxi driver-esque look, and in terms of not sort of aggressive, but sort of steady, and not sort of unyielding. So which I found really amazing, in terms of sort of the beak actually being something that was sort of talking in a way, but I think your eyes are equally kind of holding a conversation with the viewer, in that sense of what they're saying about the work and what you're kind of communicating with it. And I found that really important. I'm glad it's not CGI. I'm really happy that this is a sculpture. So that I found really good. It's really like, oh great, that's so nice. Because it's just this the theatricality of it then that is definitely, that makes it so alive.
Can I? Okay. I love it for, I mean, I have to admit ashamedly that I've not seen the film, but I've seen the kind of the image. I kind of love the kind of the image of the breast, which is always looks like eyes kind of looking at you, yet you just take that with your stare, which is really interesting. To be honest, yeah, I mean, for the breast to become a beak, talking beak is amazing. I made a piece of a sculpture, something like in 1986, with an 11-foot penis, which had a beak on it. um, and a beard and it was one of my I mean, I did a lot of stuff with sexuality in relation to animals and stuff at that time. I don't know why, but it's an interesting thing. It was a piece of a sculpture as well. So there was a kind of, it was quite comical in some way, but it also was made in a male-dominated sculptural department. And so the head of department, who was always like walking quite straight, all the boys had to walk under it and just look at their own ego. But it just, your work just reminded me of that sculpture. Of course, I don't make those kind of sculptures anymore. But I'm sorry to be talking. So it's a relationship between trying to kind of make the connection with this sculpture and is that what did you make? What was the material you made the beak from?
It's made with a kind of resin, because
Okay.
it was a challenge to find something that would be light enough to kind of sit on the body in that way.
I mean, it's got this heavy presence, and
Yeah.
yet, you know, on a really delicate part of, you know, the body is kind of this, you know, soft tissue. And then there's this hard beak that comes out and is like, okay, I'm going to tell you something. And then you're watching us watching you and watching the beak, which is a very interesting relationship. I think as a sculptor, I mean, again, it's really interesting that both Martina's and your work have got this sculptural element. And I'm you know, I started my artistic career as an artist, so it's an interesting thing to be asking Kheirhan about, when she was, you know, the connection between Kheirhan and all these sculptors, or originally sculptors.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but actually both Ingrid and Phoebe both make work as sculptors as well. It's a very important part of their practice, and I hadn't actually made that connection between you all, actually. And yet, you know, now that we're talking about it, actually it's the sculptural element, I think, or, you know, the way you are sculpting in space. And I think actually that has a relationship to me going back to dance. You know, I always think of it as you are sculpting in space when you're dancing, you know, you're choreographing space. And actually when you have the video screen there, there's a similar thing that you're doing actually through your performance, but also through the edit as well. The way, again, that you're choreographing and sculpting that space. So, you know, earlier when I mentioned maybe about, it's very important to me that there's quite visceral connection. Maybe this is actually where it's based in, really, actually some kind of sculptural practice being there as well. But yeah, no, it's really interesting to me that that's come up, actually, a really nice connection to make.
Hi, Robin. Sorry, I just have to say hi.
Hello, Robin.
Yeah, but I was also going to say, it's like, in a way, sort of, Kheirhan, I'm remembering your performance in Beak just really quickly. So in terms of sort of having the sculptural practice within there, and I think it's very logical in a way that this sort of comes in, because we're all having, I think, all videos that you've selected, and also in relation to your own work, it's very much the sort of that idea of, or that struggle about sort of about taking up space, about what the body is in space, and how it behaves, or how one allows it to behave, or is allowed, or is restricted. So, and that is something that obviously is very present in a sort of when we're sort of living in as feminists, because you constantly think, and as women, so when you constantly think about sort of what your body does in relation to what's in front of you or what's around you. So I think that's a very important connection in all of our works.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. And I think coming back to Miriam's, and actually, you know, my kind of encounter with it, and what is it that stayed with me through the years, has been that taking up space. And I don't see this actually as like an ambiguous work or ambivalent work. Though I can see why there's an element actually of that, you know, the body on one hand there is an ambiguity there, this mixture of animal and human, and what is it? But that ferocity of stare is so crucial, is so important. That Miriam absolutely holds your gaze and absolutely challenges you in how you look at her. I loved what you said, Maria, watching us, watching you, watching the beak. It's this, you know, this kind of triangle going round. And I think we are very challenged as a viewer in it. We, you know, the breast, as we've mentioned, you know, it's the connotation of motherhood. So, you know, I went to the National Gallery recently and was round there, and, you know, so many depictions of the Virgin Mary and the breast being exposed of a cherub, and, you know, that being one reading of it. And then the other in our, you know, contemporary culture is and, you know, back then as well, actually, the eroticism of the breast, the sexualization of the breast. And that's something that we're surrounded with constantly. And it's like, it feels inescapable, actually, those two things, sexualized or mother, you know, or the mothered breast. And this is not a mothering breast at all. And it's not a sexualized breast at all either, but very threatening. And Miriam, you said about the body speaking, and it is the body speaking very directly, but also in this language we can't understand, you know, through these kind of this clatter of the beak, this opening of the maw that is telling us something, and we have to decipher it. And that kind of act of deciphering comes through your look at us, that is telling us that we need to work this out and think about how we relate to your body. So I find it an incredibly powerful work. I think it's 52 seconds. It's very short, but very, very strong. And when I've seen it before, you've shown it on a loop. I think we showed it before at the showroom on a loop there. And it's mesmerizing as well. It's very interesting how you become kind of very sucked into that gaze, very sucked into the clatter, and actually again have quite a physical resonance to it. It always makes me kind of want to sway a bit when I watch it. There's something very kind of physical happening there. So yeah, I think it's just a really mesmerizing work, but very challenging towards the voyeurism of the viewer, and that's great.
Catherine, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tina, Miriam, and Maria. And it was fascinating conversation, honestly. And now is a 1 hour and a half. That's amazing. I have to cut them and to your work and to images. And if you want to talk anything about some point, just I would appreciate if you think that you missed some point. That would be great to talk about it.
Can I just say, I was looking at your work, Mania, the on social media, when you have this picture of yourself completely nude with your breasts, and I have to say, I mean, I really have an issue with nudity in itself, but I think when I looked at Martina's work or Miriam's work, or what you've shown in the way you challenge Orientalist kind of sexualized nudity, you know, the Algerian women and the postcards by which Malik Alula kind of shows us, kind of turning all of that around in Martina, in Miriam's work, and even in Catherine's work. All of this, there's a connection there, certainly between all the work, including yours, Mania, which is really interesting. Is very interesting. I'm still trying to formulate what the relationship is, but I have to say, I really love that image of your work as well, Mania. That
Thank you so much, Miriam.
So the vulnerability as well.
I see my body is my practice. My body is my canvas.
Yeah.
Just every day, I'm working around my body. Sometimes I'm saying I'm not my body, but I'm in my body. I have lots of trauma. My practice is exactly connection between moving image and how you can trauma therapy through the cinema, through the moving image. My practice is connection between trauma therapy and body, and it's exactly connection. Yeah, that is all my films. And also it's very personal material, but after I'm making and I'm release, is not personal, it's completely public. And yeah, I'm working with I'm performance artist front of the camera and behind the camera. But and also the concept of my films, it is not a documentary, and also is not a fiction, is a doc fiction that